Hello, everyone. I'm Brendan McCorkle, CEO of SignOut Electronic Lab Notebook, and I'll be your host for today's event. This webinar is presented by LabRoots and brought to you by SignOut. To learn more about SignOut, you can visit us at www.signout.net. We encourage you to participate today by submitting any questions you may have during the presentation. To do so, simply type them into the Ask a Question box you'll see and click Send. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. Finally, we have a few questions to ask you, the audience, about your take on digital security and data protection. Please take a moment to answer these questions, and we will share the results in our follow-up emails. I'd now like to welcome our speakers, Bhanu and Kris. For complete biographies on these guys, please visit the Biography tab at the top of your screen. So to jump in, first of all, for those who don't know the BladeStack crew, I encourage you to go to their website and to look at all their assets. They take the concept of Bladecraft and Samurai very seriously. Hopefully you'll see today that they take security and compliance nearly as security, if not more. And so I'm really looking forward to jumping it into both of you. So today, what we've decided to do is to walk through a little bit about the importance of data security and protection, its impact on society and work, especially for those in the audience, and really, most importantly, on biotech. So for a little bit of color on myself, this is my third company. Two of the three companies that I've started have gone through this process of getting high levels of compliance and certifications, and really started to form a sense that it's really more about security than it is about compliance. Now, for many of you in the audience, this might be backwards. You may be thinking, well, this is really about compliance because I have boxes to check. I have bosses to keep happy. I want to keep my data safe. So we have a couple things that we'll explore to go in between both of those issues and how it impacts you guys. So I'd love if you guys could give just a very quick blurb on your company, and we can jump right into maybe just introduce your company right as you start to talk about your perspective of data security in biotech. So I think first, let's talk about what you think security is and why our audience should care about security in biotech specifically.
Sure. I'll go ahead and start. Thanks, Brendan. So Kris Martel, one of the co-founders here with BladeStack, and I guess a little bit about us, and you kind of hit it, a very good description with saying that we take our cyber samurai and compliance blades very serious, and that's exactly what we do. We are hyper-focused on compliance. We're a major focus in FedRAMP, but all NIST and compliance related type of activities and support of organizations like SignOut, who are looking to go through and obtain and get to the highest levels of compliance and security for their organizations. So so why is it important? And your question is the importance of security and protection and impacts on society, especially in biotech. So if you think about biotech sector, it's not just another industry, it's a powerhouse of innovation that touches our lives in many profound different ways, right? We're talking about groundbreaking developments from the COVID-19 vaccinations to reshaping global health and landscape to advanced personalization of medicine, sustainable agriculture. There's so much that's going on right now. It's super important. These aren't just scientific achievements either. They're milestones that are changing the world, tackling some of the biggest challenges and safeguarding our planet. So it is very important to us as far as compliance and what we do, but in securing the biotech area. So, but with all this groundbreaking work, it comes with significant risks. And of course, that's one of the things that we're focused on. So imagine the wealth of data and intellectual property in biotech. It's a veritable gold mine, and unsurprisingly, it draws a lot of attention from the cyber criminals. So a lot of attention being set there. So this area in biotech is by default in need of a lot of protection of the data, of the intellectual property rights and so forth going in there. So and like organizations like SignOut aren't just advancing science and so forth, they're also advancing the front line, defending against cyber threats and aim to snatch away invaluable research and sensitive information from companies and in researching partners and so forth. So that's kind of where, one of the areas where it's not just biotech, it's all industries, but biotech has been making huge leaps and bounds and that's a important piece for us to make sure we help contribute to that. Bhanu, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think that you really covered most of the key points. And one of the things I would probably really emphasize is these frameworks, they are compliance frameworks, but at the end of the day, we kind of look at it differently, as Brendan mentioned initially, is it's actually the security aspect of it. And I know we're going to be going into the security aspect and touching on some of the elements from the security standpoint, which I'm looking really forward to, because at the end of the day, as Brendan also mentioned initially, was a lot of organizations will look at the compliance side of things, but not necessarily the security side of things. And you may think it's the same side of, or the different side of the same coin, but from the implementation side, they're very different beasts. Meaning, compliance is a checking the check boxes, implementation of proper security protocols, and implementation of security is a completely different. So I'm looking forward to getting into those pieces a little bit later on.
Could one of you guys tell me a little bit about the story behind starting the firm? What led you to start a security focused firm?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So Bono and I have been working together for many years. I like to say that we are brothers from another mother. We don't exactly look alike, but we consider each other brothers, and we've had the same goals, ambition, work ethics, and we've been in the FedRAMP world and compliance, specifically FedRAMP, since the beginning. And we had always been in advisory and contract and working in assessments and compliance and cybersecurity. And we had gone over to a product company and doing robotic process automation and automating evidence collection and testing. And we had former clients and friends reaching out to us, asking us if we were still able to provide our level of our expertise to them and help them with their different certifications. And so we talked about it, and we, because our passion is there, we said, hey, let's do this and let's do it our way. Let's do it. Let's bring in our culture. And we built this product with a call product, but it's a service offering to organizations where all we do is focus on making sure that we provide the level of engineering, architecting, and expertise to be able to not only get you the certifications that you want in for compliance, whether it be FedRAMP or HITRUST or ISO 27000, SOC 2, so forth, but to do it to a point where this is ingrained in and it's part of your organization. So it's not just and you mentioned it's a checkbox and we've done this paperwork and here it is and so forth. We do it to the point we do this and build it into so that it's part of the culture of the organization that we're working with, because that's part of our culture and we take it. Now, at the same time, a lot of these certifications that you get are just baselines. They're saying these are the minimum things that you need to do, right? And so we make sure that organizations understand this and stress the importance of this and doing it correctly, because we want to go beyond that if we can, right? We want to do it the right way. We want to make sure that we say we're the most technically absurd company and advisors that you'll meet, right? We want to prove that. And we also want you guys to be, and all of our clients and SignNote and specifically, is the fact that you guys are going down that route saying, look, we don't want to do the baseline. We don't want to do the minimum, right? We don't want to be the organization that has a SOC 2 or has a certification and then gets breached and then your data's out there or your IP's out there. So it's going beyond that minimum baseline. And that's what we do and our clients buy into.
That's perfect. The thing I have brought from the CloudMine days, guys, is this issue in the HIPAA compliance world where the laws written about HIPAA were written before mobile devices were really adopted. But the companies that are being held to the standard are more and more frequently an app first or app forward health IT, digital health, connected health companies. And so 3/4 or more of their footprint is mobile. And so they're being held to this checklist of items that were written without the idea of mobile even in the statesmen's minds when they wrote the laws, right? So these were very well-intentioned guidelines of how to take care of PII and PHI, but then also they didn't even have spend a minute in the what about mobile, right? So this is part of what I mean when we talk about sort of security versus compliance. Compliance is following this list. Security might be more about either doing it right or maybe doing more of what we talk about. I had a mentor once who gave this analogy, and I apologize, it's a little bit of an aggressive analogy because a security guard dies in this analogy. But the analogy is for a big warehouse with a security guard. And the point is, what is the security guard there for? And the reality in security personnel is that the security guard is actually not there to stop the intruders. The security guard is there to let you know if the intruders did something really bad, like kill the security guard and take your stuff. So this is a warning system. This isn't it may be a deterrent. By the way, a lot of this stuff is a deterrent, but it is not an absolute deterrent, right? It's actually more of a warning system. It's more of the checks and balances to know, is my stuff safe? How do we know if it's still there? It's more nuanced than just, we have a security guard, so it's fine. Having a security guard at all is compliance. Having the systems to know, are they still there? Are they doing rounds? Is my stuff still there? What happened to them? Do we have video of the thing happening, this aggressive thing happening to the security guard so that we could track it back or get our stuff back? This is security. Yep. And these are very similar concepts. They both involve a security guard, right? But they're not the same thing. And the impact to the business that has this warehouse are very, very different. So
I really like that now. Yeah, sorry, I really like that analogy because it's like, hey, we have a SOC 2, we have a security guard, okay? You check the box. Okay, yeah, exactly. Right. So I definitely hear you on that.
For the record, if you look at every security breach out there, all those companies have SOC 2s, right? So it's something that happens regardless. And
this is the other piece, right? Is the security people like to talk about the gate problem, and I've heard this called a bunch of different things. But so you have a castle and it has a gate. This gate can be open and closed. So maybe instead of it being a security guard, we'll stop picking on the security guard. We can make it about this big fortress on the hill, right? If somebody leaves the gate open, it doesn't matter that you have a big castle on the hill. The whole value of the castle goes away. There have been some really big breaches of hospital data where somebody left a setting on a very secure system, like Amazon GovCloud or something like this, and they manually left a gate open, which is a human error in a very, very, very well-built system. This is not Amazon's fault. So we have all of these edges, right? So we have the perception of which parts are security, which parts are compliance. We have, why should I, the chooser of a vendor or piece of software or running a lab, care? And we have lots of words like HIPAA, like ISO, like SOC 2. So this is a nice bridge to the next question, which is, which pieces of these do you guys think are the most overcomplicated, and how can we break them down into simple blocks so that people really understand when I'm looking at, is there a gate? Is there a guard? Am I ISO? If we take some of the jargon out, what are the real basic building blocks we're talking about here, and what should people be trying to make sure they're considering?
Sure, I can go ahead and jump into that. So when we actually think about cybersecurity frameworks or just talk about cybersecurity frameworks, a lot of folks believe that they're pretty straightforward. If you take ISO or SOC 2, again, as we discussed, they often smoothly translate into technical requirements typically, because at the very high level and implementation level, they're either procedural or policy driven, and you must have these things in place. But when you actually dive a bit deeper, if you work with cybersecurity frameworks which are based on NIST standards, that's where things typically will begin getting tricky, especially if you consider the interpretation of actually implementing these controls. That's where the security jargon and the certifications and all of these get really, really complex. Because, for example, if you take multi-factor authentication for both privileged and non-privileged accounts, it sounds pretty simple. But if you actually think about it, where does it apply? Is it actually when you log into your VPN, the web application? What exactly is a privileged account in a system with a complex role, with complex roles? And now you bundle on single sign-on across all services with multi-factor. Is that enough? or do we need MFA for every time we go through these services? Kind of to your example of, if you have a really big moat or a gate with a big moat, and then you have single sign-on, well, if you get through the first gate, is that sufficient? Where does it actually apply? And if you consider, the situation gets even more complex if you start thinking around the actual nuances of the implementation, from a service account to immutable application to infrastructure as code. Kind of going back to kind of responding back to your question is, if you think about frameworks which are respected, such as FedRAMP, they're rigorous, yes, but they also offer a higher standard of security. Not necessarily, yes, you're going to meet compliance by implementation of the security. But for example, the latest efforts by FedRAMP, they're aiming to lower those bars of entry for smaller organizations, including biotech, startup. It's about making that gold standard much more accessible. And overall, the key of grasping these requirements, especially if you're new to this or don't necessarily have an advisor, is actually going through the process, immersing yourself in it. And for more complex cybersecurity frameworks, it's actually just a journey of understanding and applying these standards in the most effective way. That may sound abstract, but I think I see them as maturity. You start with a more simplified cybersecurity framework, take ISO, and SOC 2, get your policy and procedural level implementation there. You will meet some checkboxes and some requirements, but actual security implementation is going to take the actual understanding of the fundamental of what you actually have implemented in your system. So I know that's a bit of a long-winded way of kind of answering that question, but hopefully that made sense. Kris, I'm not sure if you want to add in.
Yeah.
I want to jump in one thing quick to take maybe two steps back for some of the folks in the audience. Controls is something I think the three of us take for granted, but not everybody may take for granted. So in this world, the list of controls is the list of things that are potentially at risk and what you're going to do about it. So the one I always pick on is physical security, right? So you come into an office, the more seriously they take security, the more likely you are to have a badge, and you beep on the door, right? So there's small, medium, and larges of this, like there are in Letty things. Does everybody have the same card and it just opens the door? This is the key. Like a physical key. If anybody has a copy of the key, they can get in. But I don't know who you are. You just have the key, which is some level of trust, right? Okay, cool. Having the key is one gate, as we were talking about. But actually having that key be yours and only yours, and we knew that it was you, and we know at what time and where you used it, and we also know if anybody walked in after you while the gate was open. This is a very different answer to the same problem. This is a much more elegant version of the key. One is more secure than the other. This thing might be like, we have physical security. We might say both have physical security. So these are things that happen in a workflow of a professional workspace that a lot of us take for granted as, it's the badge to the office. It's not just the badge to the office. And I think that the misconception I saw some of the most in HIPAA is that there's something like 250, 256 controls that you need to address. You don't actually have to answer every single one of them. You also don't have to answer every single one of them in a certain way. And so I think this is one of the places that has a lot of potential to be confusing, is that I like to say these things are straightforward, but not easy, right? You still have to go through more than 200 things and say, what are we doing about getting into the office? What do we do? Who can access the database? Who can't access the database? Can we prove it? But there's this sort of cluster of who can do what? Can we show it? Can we play it back? That cover so much of this list of 200. And then the difference between doing these things because you're supposed to, because security, and compliance is, has someone who's not you come in and tested whether you actually do the stuff that you're saying. So these are just sort of these sort of high level building blocks, which is the company that's saying they are compliant is following this list of controls. They have much more input into them than you think. You might say, we don't even have a physical office. We don't care about physical security. Okay, if you have a good defense of this, maybe this is fine. But you have to show why it's okay that you have a guy over here logging into a database, a guy over here logging into the database. Can you show that it was really them? Can you turn off their access if there's a problem? Can you have audit logs, right? You have to answer all these questions And then you can't just say, trust me, right?
Right.
This is the whole point of compliance, is actually having someone else come in and say, no, don't just trust them. They told us all the things they do, and we spent a couple days seeing if they do actually do what they say they do. We watched the door. Did anybody go in? We call it tailgating. Did anybody go in after them? Because if one person tailgates, this whole system of having a key goes out the window. We can't tell you who was in the office and who wasn't. So this is only one of the 256, but it's always the one I pick on because it's the one we all feel, even if we're not in the space.
Yeah, I agree. And so those are definitely those are big concerns. And the criminals, the hackers, the evildoers out there they're thinking for every way you can think of to lock and secure your system down or your office or whatever. They are coming up with 10 different ideas of how you never thought they could possibly mitigate your, and picking on your physical security stuff too. I've done this, and we've done so where we've had to hack the systems and stuff. We didn't have the cars to get in and stuff, and got these beautiful doors with the sensors on there and everything. And so when you're going in and someone wants to exit the office, right, from a security from a fire code perspective, that these doors automatically open and lock, so they want to be able to get out. So if you just pull the fire alarm, right, do the doors open, and then you can just walk in, grab what you need, and then be gone and exit the building too. That's one way. But other stuff is sensors, and you can sit there and you can take a coin or a washer or something. You can heat it up and you can just slide it through the door, right, and let it roll there until, and it's got to, you have to make sure if you get heat activation or whatever, so it's going to pick up something and cause the motion to trigger, and then all of a sudden you're in the door, and now you can walk around roaming free. Doesn't mean that the other offices and stuff aren't secured, but there's so many ways to get around everything that you put in place, and so you always have to be looking at the latest and greatest. And that kind of goes, and I think we'll talk about this later, but from like in the cloud, there's so much more money being spent in the cloud security and securing those environments than anybody can possibly do on their own on premise, right? Versus if you look at like Amazon and Google and Azure, right, and look at those data centers and look at the they got armed guards and everything, man traps going through it, and so it goes much farther and beyond. But like Bhanu said, and I think actually getting back to the actual question with the overcomplicated aspects of data security jargon, certifications, and so forth, it does sound like a lot, and it's like it can be confusing, the questions that are being asked and certification. And you said the 256, you got the ISO 27000, which has a separate set of controls that has the physical in there as well. But then you've got in FedRAMP, there's 323 controls for a FedRAMP moderate, even not even going into high, right? And so there's a lot that goes into that. And Bhanu kind of touched on that with his looking at the multi-factor authentication, single sign-on. He kind of went about like 6-7 layers deep, and you did as well in the security, Brandon. But it can be very complicated, and how much do you need to ask? And it really depends on what kind of certification you're going for, for your organization, and what kind of level of protection of the data do you have. And then at the end of the day is if you want to simplify it in these certifications, your documentation and the processes and the policies and everything that you should be following should be implemented and be done by all of the stakeholders, all of the workers, all the employees. And it shouldn't be one of those check boxes. Okay, we're done. Take all the documentation, put it on a shelf, and put it away, and no one looks at it until it's time for an audit again, right? So if you want to take that, oh my God, this is so complicated, take it away. Make it just make the actual procedures and the job of what everybody does, what they actually do, and make it real life, and follow those procedures and policies, and everything becomes a lot more simple.
Cool. So I think this is, maybe to steal our mutual thunder from the end of the webinar, or one of the things that people should look for is, as they're building this trust, there are characteristics of people who are more or less security minded. And one of the things we're doing here, and could do all day, is we're talking about security, and we're talking about our approach to security and how we think about it, and we're doing it in the open. So one of the things that I think people should look for is, are the companies you're evaluating doing their security work in the open? This is something the security security professionals take this very seriously. It's part of bettering your craft is to do this in the open. So there's sort of a binary, are they doing their work and their methodology in the open or not? But this is kind of anchoring us in the world of vendors and consultants. So guys, I want to shift to sort of hard switch into the lab here. So because we could talk about this part probably all day. So when we're thinking specifically of biotech, or maybe even more specifically in the lab, what sort of protection protocols should a lab be thinking about that may be different from a retail site or a corporate office of a non-biotech business? Are there anything that are really common pitfalls, common misconceptions that you see really in life sciences R&D in the lab?
Sure, I can kind of jump into this, and it's a really great question, because I'll begin with saying, if you take a moment to put things into perspective, and just as you mentioned a moment ago, Brendan, where we're taking a lot of these things for granted. And for folks like us who may be deeply embedded in the world of cybersecurity, certain practices such as ensuring HTTPS and TLS 1.2 and or higher are just second nature to us. It's like, okay, we implement MFA. We just need to do it. These are just basics. When I sign up for Google, when I sign up for any other service, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. If I'm gonna go acquire a new software, I need to make, typically I'll make sure, hey, if this looks sketchy, I'm gonna run a hash check on it. It's just by nature. That being said, the basics are our starting points, and it's crucial. And organizations like Biotech, such as SideNote, they often have a much more broader impact, and they face more diverse challenges. To kind of go back to addressing your question head on, in terms of the significant pitfall we often see and encounter, is folks underestimating the importance of security. And it's not uncommon for organizations to get serious about data protection following a breach. It's a reactive approach that unfortunately is a tale old as time. What we see is we encourage organizations to prioritize security proactively, not just as a compliance checkbox, but as an integral part of their ethical commitment, particularly, again, in biotech, where it ties back to the core principle from NIH, which is non-malfeasance in bioethics. I probably butchered the pronunciation there, but it's about safeguarding data, and not because you have to, because it's the right thing to do for the protection and integrity of the research that the biotech researchers are actually doing. And Kris, I'm not sure if you want to add in, jump throw something in.
Yeah,
I want to hone in on this. Yeah. This last piece is really good, which is, I think, where these two pieces meet in the middle is maybe folks who've already had this experience, whether as a customer or a vendor or a professional service provider, where they've already gone through the journey of learning why it's important. And so now they already have this sort of, no, you need to. And then this other side is, I have to, or I'm worried that I have to eventually. How do we bring these two together?
Yeah. So one of the things as we're saying that is also from the perspective of how do you, that's a perfect question. How do we bring them together? So you have to balance the need for making the research and the capabilities and the services like SideNote's laboratory, having these things easily accessible but secure, right? So you want to, how do you bring that together where, okay, so SideNote needs to take on the responsibility of ensuring that it's secure, all the data is secure, the encryption is there, and all of the crazy hard things that appear really hard, and some of them can be complicated, and make it really simple and seamless for the user and not inhibit their ability to work, right? Because that's going to be the big thing, is like, because the researchers, in the different organizations and companies in the biotech world, their job isn't to care about compliance. There isn't to care about security so much as they want to do their job. They want to do their research. They want to be able to make discoveries. They want to advance, science, and that's really what they need to do. And so you have to make it seamless, right? And if you can do that and you can combine those two, then and doing these certifications and providing like FedRAMP, for example, which is the gold standard, the highest bar, and having that out there, a cloud service offering, and having that level of security, that gives the peace of mind to the users, the consumers, and the researchers, and the people to actually go do their work, and do it without having to understand all of the complexities that go along with it, right? And you can kind of keep it in the background, but know it's there, right? So, but you do need to talk about it and tell them, it's like, hey, this is secure, and this is better than anything else that's out there, because we hit the standard of security and compliance, and we're make sure that everything you do is encrypted, data at rest, data in transit, to your authentication in there. If we open the moat, nothing's just open the drawbridge, it's not all just going to come spilling out, or anybody's going to just go in and grab what they want. We have defense in depth. We've done all of everything that needs to be done. You just go ahead and go do your work now. Once you go through the processes, our processes, or Sino's processes of how we actually secure.
So this is a really interesting place for a pithole, because I think the value proposition of kind of trust us, don't worry about it, just go do your work is present in a very highly complicated, technically savvy, workflow-centric solution. It's also present in the absence of security, right? This is very workflow-centric. If there's no security,
what's funny is
it's
how
easy.
you
It's not
just
going to interfere at all.
described that. How you just described that. You threw a lot of big words, right? You just chained them all together. It's like, wow, that was complicated, but it sounded really good. But the reality is if you have a FedRAMP ATO, you're proving it day in and day out, that you have to be operating on this level of compliance. So that is the assurance level that you're getting there, versus saying that, we just do this, but we don't have a certification that says that we do that, right? So it's easy to say that you do all these things, right, but are you actually living the practice? And like a FedRAMP certification does that, because you have to do your continuous monitoring. You have to meet all of everything that you've done to get certified on it. You have to live it and do it every day, and then you're assessed on it annually by an independent assessor that isn't going to cover for you. So
there's a workflow analogy that many of you guys may have experienced at your doctor's office, right? So a lot of times in the hospital or in a practice, you will see this badge, right? It gets through the doors too, but it might actually unlock the terminal that they're charting on you, the patient, right? And every time they go over to the computer, they're badging in. This is the proxy for what Bhanu was talking about. Two-factor authentication, they're typing in a password too. So they've got a factor in the password and a factor from the physical key every time they interact with their computer. If you have watched the frustration of this clinician with how many times they have to do this damn login process, you can just like feel this frustration tangibly in the room. Yeah. This is really, really secure, but this is also really awful for the individual. And so this is the balance that I think a lot of people are trying to strike, is how can we have the presence of that same level of security without this level of frustration? And so there are some things that you can do to give the same proxy for this. Like if you do, some of the single sign-on vendors will give you a token. This is not to get too technical, but you can then reuse this token, not reuse it to give it to somebody else and just have your way with it. But now I come back into the system 7 times in the next 10 minutes and it still knows that it's me. Still secure, still don't have to log in, much less upsetting for the user. So some of these things are paired like this. But I think the danger is, to Kris's point, not having to log in 6 or 7 times could also come from a software that doesn't use a single sign-on vendor. And so they have you log in once in an unencrypted way, and it feels super easy to use because, oh, this is just like Excel and whatever, I emailed it to my coworker. Or in the hospital, I took a picture of the wound and texted it to the resident. Okay, this is way outside. The hospital would have a fit if they knew you were doing that, but there's not any barriers for you to stop. So there's lots of behavior around the edges that feels really nice from a workflow centric that's outside. So when we try to do this balance, one of the things I'm hearing is, okay, well, you can know that if you have this badge, right, someone can't get FedRAMP without a federal agency sponsoring them. This is a pretty strong testament of the caliber of their work, right? If the FDA is saying we trust these guys, all right, this 10, 50, 100 person lab may also trust them because the FDA said so. But it's also not just the FDA. It's also this independent auditor saying, okay, then we came in and we checked whether they do what they say. So you have two levels of external credibility, and then you can choose whether their workflow stuff is close enough to your workflow to be happy. But are there other places where, I don't know, where ISO, you might say, oh, well, they're ISO compliant, but that's not really the right level. It's the wrong badge for the type of work you do. So can you sort of give an example of when FedRAMP might be the right one, when ISO might be the wrong one? Any mappings that we may mismap in the market?
Sure, and there's a big difference between ISO 27000 or SOC 2 and FedRAMP, right? So FedRAMP is, by the way, is for organizations who want to sell to the federal government, or the federal government requires it for any kind of cloud service offering that is going to be out there. And then what is similar to that is also state ramp. Is state ramp and FedRAMP. It's at a state level, but a lot of the same overlap there. And then you have like ISO 27000, which is you define your scope, and it's more of an organization. Typically more organization type certification, and there is some overlap, but it's very little bit. And you may have seen memes and stuff out there when you talk about like SOC 2s and ISO 27000, and they're like, they come out and they've got somebody and they're holding like a stack of papers. It's 100 pages thick, say, right? And they're like, oh yeah, it's like, no, look, I've got this. How about FedRAMP, right? And then you bust it out, and now you've got that, you got this massive document that's about 50 times the size, and sitting next to the ISO 27000, right? Because of the level of depth and detail, and it goes into that, and and the ISO 27000 does not have to be in the cloud, right? It's a lot of, or it's at your organization. You talk about your physical security you're doing, so forth. So FedRAMP is definitely is the highest bar out there as far as, remember, and even then FedRAMP is still a baseline. This is the baseline level of security that they're expecting, and you really should go beyond that. So it's a very high level baseline, which is fantastic, but it's still only a baseline, and it is in the cloud only. Bhanu,
So
want
as
to add anything else?
someone in the lab is looking at a vendor who has any number of these things, and we're already touching on, so if HIPAA isn't covering mobile, but more and more health IT is moving towards mobile, okay, what should I do about this? If we think FedRAMP is the highest bar, and somebody says they're ISO, are there how should one of us as a scientist, as a head of research operations, looking at any particular vendor and go, all right, what can I do as a quick sort? Does this company take this seriously? Are they doing what we're talking about, which is, are they taking security farther than compliance? What does this look like? What does this sound like? What sort of cues can someone who is educated maybe a little more after today than yesterday, dangerous knowledge of security and compliance, how can they tell, hey, vendor A, vendor B, partner C, piece of software D gets it? What should they be looking for?
Sure, I can go ahead and jump in. So typically what we see is, and this is, I'll let Kris jump in as well, but from a personal take in terms of evaluation when we're looking at vendors, is a couple of things I would ask the audience is, what type of work are you going to be doing? If it's going to be sensitive work and it's data and research data that's sensitive, typically you would want to make sure the type of work you're doing is in line with the type of certification they have. Are you doing health type certifications, maybe HIPAA, high trust, and potentially FedRAMP if it's collaborative work, because there's major collaboration being done in the government space, and those type of certifications such as FedRAMP will help with collaboration as well, especially you're collaborating with different research units, different schools, different labs, and all of those elements. And so from an evaluation standpoint, again, nothing against SOC 2 Type 2, but typically when we see SOC 2 Type 2, there are self-attestations. So it's more so, okay, well, it is what
This
it
is
is.
really I'm so glad you said this. I think this is something that people don't know. I didn't know this before getting into the world, is that some of these, and SOC 2 Type 2 and HIPAA both have this. This is level 3. I always get the HIPAA backwards, whether level 3 is the highest or the lowest. But the lowest level of HIPAA and SOC, the company can just say, we follow the rules. This is a form of compliance.
Yep.
But there is no audit proving that you do it. You've just been willing to put it out there that you have said this. This may be less risky than not saying that you do it, but it is certainly more risky than proving that you do it, right? So this is something I think I'm very glad you called this out for people who are looking at these two, HIPAA and SOC. If these are the only ones, which one, right? This is a question that you can ask a vendor. What level? Which level of these two do you have? Do you have an audit report? Do you have anything that you can share? If it's self-attested, they don't have anything to share. They can't give you the export from the auditor, right?
And another question is, and you can ask them, is just say and see what their answer is. Like, hey, are you for example, knowing that FedRAMP after hearing this is the highest bar, and it's not easy to get FedRAMP. It's not. It takes a long time. You're talking over a year's worth of work. You're a year and a half worth of work to get through this and get yourself set up so that you can actually get your FedRAMP ATO, right? And to do that, it is it is a big commitment on time and resources and money from any organization to do so, right? And so if you ask, and I mean you're looking at different opportunity, possible vendors and solutions and so forth, and you ask and say, well, are you FedRAMP, or are you looking to get FedRAMP? And then the answer is no, and it's just no. It's like, and you ask why, right? And typically it's going to be, well, there's really no need for us to do that. Okay, so is the need that they don't want to sell to the government and so they just don't want to do that, or is it the need that it is such a pain, it's too hard to do, so they don't want to have to jump through those hoops and get that certification and maintain it, that's the even bigger thing, right? That's the hardest thing. So you find out, and you kind of get an idea of what organizations take the security of the data and information and research and of their what's inside their environment, the cloud service offering, seriously, because it's do you want to protect it, or do you just want to do the bare minimum and check boxes and get something and makes everybody feel warm and fuzzy inside, and you get that SOC 2 or whatever, and it's like, well, I got a piece of paper, that's great, but we've got a whole army of people. We got all these things going on in procedures and policies that we follow to ensure that your stuff is compliant, and we can show you, and we have someone who came externally and audits and does this every year, and they come pen test us, and so forth. So you're getting all those things, because a lot of these, like an ISO 27000, you don't have to go get an external pen test, right? It's all based on whatever you do internally, and they kind of look through that. But a FedRAMP, you get a FedRAMP ATO, you're getting an external pen test by a third party that, and you can't use your own.
Can you give the 30-second version of what a pen test is and what this is trying to uncover for any who might not know?
Yeah, sure. So a pen test is a penetration test, and I guess to put it real simple in terms of, this is like a ethical hacker. The assessing firm will do an ethical hack of your system to try to see if they can breach your system, your offering, and get in. So there's many different attack vectors that you can do, and Ben, you already looked at some of those from a social engineering and walking on, but it's actually going through and testing multi-tenancy and so forth. So if you as a cloud service offering, you have multiple clients in your cloud service offering, you have a lot of researchers using your software in the biotech, or you're mixed in with other organizations. You make sure that that data is secure and is just specifically to yours. So that's like one example where if you can get in on one tenant, can you bounce to another one? There's that kind of testing and so forth. But it's the external hacking of your system is a penetration test.
The other thing that's,
and that goes for mobile too. Yeah, that goes for mobile too. Up in the apps, up in the Google apps and the iCloud and all that. We have gone through and we've had pulled down the apps that log into these cloud service offerings and hacked those those apps
Mhm.
and get root access into databases and so forth. So all of that is fair game when looking at this.
The other thing,
And this
which is, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going
no
to say the
no
other
go ahead.
thing, other folks tend to not look at penetration testing and together with is social engineering. There's a major social engineering aspect with pen testing as well. So
Yep.
a lot of that is going to be trying to planning and run trying to Google search and try to find what you can find online and use social engineering tactics to kind of get through and get exfiltrate data.
We do this at SignOut. If somebody leaves their laptop open, someone will sit down and type in Slack, happy hours on me today. This
Yeah.
is the
So and we
sort
would
of
do
like
the same
reverse social
thing.
engineering to keep us honest about
It is.
watching
It's
for
like,
this. Yeah.
you know, and you do it to other people. If I was there with side note, I'd be like, Brendan, I need a raise. Could you approve my? And so you have these people asking these
Company
questions
bonuses
for
for
other
everyone.
people.
No. Yeah. So this is this sort of stuff is the kind of things that vendors will talk about, or there are other questions that having an information security steering committee and ISMS committee is a control in at least 3 of these, if not all of them, right? So this is like one question you could ask a vendor. Hey, who's on your ISMS committee? And if the people are like, what do you mean? Okay, this is a yellow flag, maybe more than a yellow flag, right? So I want to be sensitive to time, guys. We've gotten a couple of questions, and you mentioned the cloud a couple times in your last answer. So the two I want to make sure we cover while we have time is sort of cloud ? And AI ? So I think there's lots of perceptions and misperceptions about cloud security. So maybe we start here, guys, and then if we have time after this, we can bridge into whether or not there's anything specific to AI that changes any of these conversations specific to this new technology, because it's what everybody's talking about.
Sure. I'll briefly jump in because, as Kris mentioned on the beginning of the call, we actually just got off a similar conversation in regards to one of our own service offerings, which is the Blade Ramp, which is, we're looking at on-prem versus cloud. And one of the major pieces is a lot of the times what organizations don't realize, or they may realize, but they'll take for granted, is the amount of work that goes into actually managing the infrastructure on-prem. There's still a class that I think there's a couple schools of thoughts. One is, because I can feel it, it's mine, I can log into it, I feel secure, this is mine, and I have the keys to it, and I trust myself, and I'm impenetrable. Versus, well, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what AWS or Google Cloud or Azure or Microsoft or what have you are actually doing, how they're managing infrastructure, and there's a significant amount of the management standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, that sure, if you are accustomed to on-prem, you got to manage the services, you got to manage the server, you got to manage patching, you got to manage how often the actual asset is redeployed. If you're immutable infrastructure, if you're in the integrations with other applications, do you have integrations with your software? Are you going to have to update? And there's just so many things that start coming together, especially if you're trying to be more effective and efficient. And if you have a CI/CD pipeline, hopefully that is, you're moving more towards a efficient matter of deploying your infrastructure. All of these items, and then having the resources to be able to actually manage these services and these resources, that gets very overwhelming very quickly, as opposed to the cloud version. Folks have armies and they have a fully staffed arsenal of individuals ready, responsible for purely patching, vulnerability scanning, deploying and managing the services, making sure all services which are being used are properly integrated, making sure all of these items that you don't have to worry about are actually being taken care of. So that's the technical side that I think a lot of folks that are not in the cybersecurity or the infrastructure IT realm kind of will take for granted.
I think this is another misconception from outside this field is the most common exploit is from an unpatched system. And so this is sort of when you're looking at, we talk about Bob and IT, or this is what I talk about, Bob from IT, and you talked about having armies. So Amazon and Google have tens of thousands of Bob. So the chances that they have actually patched it quickly are very high. And when it's at a hospital or a lab, the chance of their Bob, who's only one Bob, maybe he's also the security guard in my example earlier, so he's doing other stuff as well as being Bob from IT, is very low. So people might get to this, it might feel fine for the flow of corporate life for me to do this patch in 2 weeks. We went home for Thanksgiving, we'll see you in a week. And in this window, there was a vulnerability that made it to the internet. Hey, this system can be exploited here. And then somebody tries it on your system and then you apply the patch. This is the wrong order. They've already gotten in. So this is one of the differences. And this is a very real one. And when you see a ransomware in hospitals, it's almost always this. This is some of these are really old exploits too. These are things that should have been patched years ago, and they were forgotten or whatever. Fill in the blank. Very, very well intentioned. Bob's here. I don't want to pick on Bob too much. I think we already killed him earlier in the conversation. But this, Bob is not bad at his job here. It's just very common. Yeah. And then he went home for Thanksgiving. I mean, this is so rude, right? So this combination of I also really like what you said about feeling like you're safe because you have the keys, right? So Bob, this poor security guard feels good and you feel good because you have a security guard and the security guard has the keys. Well, now if we get to the security guard, the person who got to the security guard has the keys. This is the trouble. You think about the bank, a lot of banks, the security guard doesn't have the keys. We should pay attention to this. We have a lot of digital proxies to these same systems. It's safer for everybody and our stuff at the bank if someone can't get to the president or the security guard or the whoever and then get into the vault. If you need to have more than one of them, or if you have to have the keys and the person or be the person, all of these levels have sort of a digital component that is represented in the same sort of way. So I think this is sort of a false positive of I have the keys, that means I'm safe. Actually, only one person having the keys or anyone having the keys might be less safe. Right.
Single point. And the other I want to just touch on, and he made the point, is people feel like this is mine. I have it. It's my they have this ownership to it, and it's something that they can touch. And then I hear it all the time is, well, I don't want my stuff out in the cloud for everybody to be able to get to. It's like, okay, so is the only way you can access your applications, your data is being physically on site? There's no remote access there's nothing at all, right? So no one can get to your stuff without being physically locked in a room. There's no internet connectivity. There's nothing going on. There's no email going onto the same machines that have access to the same data or anything either, right? Because that's how ransomwares happen typically, is you get an email, you click on this, then you're in, right? So it's like, they already have access. So saying that it's out in the cloud is not a real argument. It's your stuff. If you have remote access somehow, if you have email, if you have any kind of connectivity going into the same systems that are touching your data, then it's exposed. So like you might as well move to the cloud and be more secure, at least from the physical perspective, and in the amount of money and resources being sent in there, and the amount of bobs that can monitor and watch. So
yeah, I think this misconception, the big people are aware of the scariness of breaches of ransomware at some of the hospitals, of the personal data, credit card losses, all of these things. But what I don't think people appreciate is most of those that we read about in the news are exploits of on-premise solutions. They're not actually major data breaches of cloud providers. So this has sort of shifted in the security community over the last decade. That cloud has sort of been demonstrated to be more secure, but I don't think our perceptions in industry have caught up. So hopefully that helps some people in the audience feel safer. Now, what we didn't touch there on is AI. So I want to touch on AI. Has the introduction of LLMs or AI or everyone's borderline obsession with it caused anything new in terms of what's scary, what's less scary, new concerns anyone in the audience should be paying attention to as a result of this wave in the market?
I'll let Bhanu's more into the AI than I am. I know I love it. I'm actually embracing it because if you're scared of something, and especially in technology, and you try to just like bury it and put it away, that's the absolutely wrong approach, right? You need to embrace it and make sure that you try to understand it, because if you understand it, you can leverage it better and protect yourself better, protect the data and so forth. But I'll let Bhanu go ahead and take the first round at this, because he's been all over this.
Yeah, sure. So, we're currently at the forefront of the latest developments in AI on a day-to-day basis. And what I like to say, and what other industry leaders say, is right now, today, is the worst AI is ever going to be. It's just going to get better, and it's going to get better, and it's going to get better. Technology is advancing so quickly. And one of the major areas which I believe there's going to be a lot of development from AI is AI ethics. With the increased use of AI, developing actual robust ethical guidelines and security protocols tailored for AI in biotech or any industry is going to be absolutely crucial in terms of making sure this AI systems are transparent, they're explainable, don't inadvertently introduce new vulnerabilities. If you think about, for example, in biotech, consider AI in the use of genome sequencing. If AI algorithms become more involved in interpreting genetic data, ensuring the security of these AI systems actually become really critical. Any compromise literally could lead to misinterpretation of genetic information with far-reaching consequences. And, right now, for example, from the LLM standpoint, and it's that I think we're also going to experience this. And I feel like from the AI standpoint, a lot of folks are actually they're either not embracing it, or the folks that are embracing AI, which I believe I've seen, is they're embracing the cloud version of AI, meaning all of these cloud solutions of AI. But I'm a tinkerer at heart as well. I have local LLMs and Llama LLMs, and I run Stable Diffusion, and I love testing these things out and having much more control over these AI models and trying to see what I can actually develop and what I can actually get out of these. And with that being said, I can see a lot of ethical areas from a AI standpoint, because there's some real, ChatGPT, as a lot of people have said, is highly nerfed now as opposed to the first version that came out. But if you actually load up a version of a local LLM with potentially similar data sets, not to the extent of GPT-4, you can get your jailbroken ChatGPT and Dan, which is do anything now. But I'll let Kris jump in.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is it's being smart about the AI and how you leverage it, right? And so organizations who are offerings, especially in the biotech world stuff, where they're saying, "Oh, we come use our solution, do this," right? Remember, in order for these AI to get smarter, it has to leverage everything it's learned or done and stuff from previous experiences as well, right? Which means that the conglomerate of everything being put in is how it's getting smarter and learning and teaching itself. For, as an example, even with ChatGPT. So if you're putting your data into something, it's learning from it, but everybody else is learning from it as well, right? So if you have sensitive data that shouldn't be going in there as well. And this even goes back, this is not even AI, but just just back into the help boards and Reddits and things like that, where it's, "Hey, I'm having problems with my firewall. I can't do this." Like, "Boy, can you send us your config?" And someone throws their config out there, right? A picture of her, and all of a sudden now you've got the entire config of your firewall out there for everybody to see, and they have IP addresses. They know everything about. So it's the same thing even with AI. You have to be smart about it. You have to put the procedures and the policies in place to ensure that you're still securing your data and you're doing it, but you need to. I don't think burying your head in the sand and ignoring AI and machine learning and so forth is the right route.
The security ecosystem likes to talk about, surface area and edges and attack vectors, but I think it's fair to say that the more complex the system that you have is, and the more times you're sharing between different sources or different parties, all of these are places it could break or get intercepted or have an exposure. And so, this sort of pairs with AI being the new thing, is it's also one of the most complicated things, and it has a whole bunch of edges. If it's taking your data, sending it out, taking it back, combining with other people, all of these are places where security something could get exposed. So there should be, I think, maybe a healthy wariness with this is more complicated than the previous version of software, which then makes a bigger surface area for security, which generally is not a warning sign, but this needs attention. If more area needs more coverage.
Yeah,
and I will say with the data going out and so forth, based on, that's a perfect example of, for example, FedRAMP does take that into consideration. It wants to know where the data is at all times, if it's going in and out of boundary, if it's going to other secure, FedRAMP offerings and so forth. But you have to understand where the data is at all times. When it's in transit, at rest, they want to know everything about it, even the metadata, right? So, and that's something that SignNote is doing, and being able to track that and be able to and provide evidence to support it, get the assessment done, your annual assessment, do the penetration test, do all of that is handled by FedRAMP, right? So it's not like that anybody's going to be sticking their head in the sand and hiding from that. No, it's about understanding where that data is, and so being able to, if you want to embrace AI, there's going to be certain parameters and ways to do that. So
yeah, one of the things I was going to just briefly touch on is, which is very, everybody knows, is the ChatGPT. I'm not sure if anyone else had experienced it, but a couple of months ago, it goes back to just basic security also goes a long way, because a couple of months ago, I'm not sure if anyone else had experienced it, but a couple of our team members had, and there was actually a way to get into other people's history by actually just going into your Chrome inspector and changing some elements in the actual front end service, and you would actually get access to hundreds of other history folks. Obviously, OpenAI immediately just fixed that, but it was because of the authentication protocol that they were using, as opposed to if you use SSO or Google login to actually log in, you would actually be able to see people that actually use the IDP for ChatGPT. So that's it's going back to just making sure also basic security principles are being followed.
This is a really nice pairing to the security guard analogy, which is this. What this looks like when we in industry put our heads in the sand is that we assume something like, because there's a security guard, there will never be an incident of any kind. And the security mindedness of this is the security guard is there because there's almost definitely going to be an incident eventually. And so we are preparing to try to lower the chances of it happening, increases the chances of knowing, and increasing the chances of being able to fix it. And so, but you'll notice in that second version, we didn't say it's never going to happen. We actually lean into the fact that it probably will. And so there is sort of a little bit of scariness being like, oh, what do you mean we can't have perfect safety? But also we're sort of leaning through that and out the other side of, but we feel better about, we're going to be able to know that it happened, which is even more terrifying to me, is you have a breach and you don't know it happened. This is the scariest. And then also being able to maybe restore your data, or, have copies somewhere else, or know that if it's gone, it's, oh, that was actually, someone from the company and on a new laptop. That wasn't somebody who is now going to go sell our data, right? So hopefully this was informative, guys. Yeah. We've hit our hour. So quick wrap. We have come to the end of the webinar. Want to make sure we thank LabRoots for hosting the webinar, Kris and Bhanu, of course, thank you for joining us today, sharing your insights. You can download a stack of slides from BladeStack covering what we discussed today in the resource tab. And please take us up on this. They have some really cool art in their slides. This will get this, what I said at the beginning of the webinar will make sense when you see all of the samurai imagery. It's really cool. Before we go, I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today and for all of the interesting questions. We only got to a couple of them, so questions we didn't get to today, we will, and which were submitted during the on-demand period, we will get after with our follow-ups as promised. Make sure you complete the survey. That's really helpful for us to know how we did, thoughts for next time, and any suggestions. This webcast can be viewed on demand. LabRoots will send you an email when it's available for replay. This should be relatively soon. Please share this email with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. And with that, until next time, take care, everybody. Take care of your data, and goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.